Not yet time to say goodbye for me. Let me add one serious comment to what the what the panel has told you. I come from the city in Germany and the area where the Brothers Grimm collected fairy tales. You know, a golden goose and Rumpelstiltskin and all these stories. So they went out to look for stories, and the stories better be good. It didn't matter whether they were credible. They had wisdom, but it didn't matter whether they were credible. I took betraying my forefathers in the city of Göttingen with Rajul and her colleagues. It's very serious that these success stories are credible. And I want to point at 4 mechanisms which we used. Number 1, the very high-powered external advisory body, and Raoul Montemayor was co-chair together with Harris Mueller, and you find the whole list of these colleagues who met and discussed and reviewed and scrutinized the work and the selections. Number 2, independent authors, not the success makers themselves, were asked to produce the studies, but people who were somewhat distant to the success story. That was another ingredient of assuring credibility. Number 3, the team itself orchestrated a review by experts, which they asked to provide reviewer comments. And last not least, we asked the Publications Review Committee of IFPRI to do blind reviews, peer reviews, and I'm very grateful that in a very fast-tracking way, the Publications Review Committee reviewed all the case studies, actually not the brief ones which you have here in the book, but the much more elaborate, detailed studies which will be forthcoming on the website. Raju, when will that be?
They're available today, and the PRC did review each case study in the book.
And the short versions. And I'm sorry to say, a few then didn't make it. I want to just review it, but there are cases which had great potentials, but some of them then were decided to be taken off the list of success stories. In the meantime, you have thought about your questions or your comments to our great panel. No, it's today not my cell phone. You're welcome to raise your hand. There are microphones in the room.
Thanks for the excellent report. I think it was a great report, and we should all embellish it and work towards achieving the goals that you've set. It is often said that if you reduce post-harvest technology losses, you could significantly increase availability of food supply, particularly on the continent of Africa. Were there any cases or successes that you care to mention in the area of post-harvest technology?
Thank you. Taking note of. Right here. And colleagues, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Blake Selzer. I work with CARE on food security. And I had a comment and question first. This is an incredible report, and I work in the area of policy advocacy. So I was really pleased by, I think it was Raoul's comments about that the real decision makers don't listen to necessarily reports that are out there, but actually to their constituents. So one of the things that I would like to hear if anyone had comments on is follow-up to this report in terms of advocating this report and getting this out to the civil society and decision makers, and not, so it's not a report left on the shelf.
Okay. Right there.
Bob Bird. Some years ago, I founded the OECD DAC group on evaluation, and one of the things that was always of interest is host country capability to assess the value of their own work. And I'm wondering whether you have thought about the institutional implications in ministries of agriculture of identifying their own successes and having a feedback loop into their own policies.
Great. Let's go right over here.
I am Stephen Carr, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm wanting someone on the panel to comment on the importance of profitability all along the value-added chain in agriculture and its significance. And there was a lot of talk about the need to take more risk. And I think an important issue is everyone along that value chain has an obligation to help mitigate risk. That's the primary objection to people taking risk. If you can mitigate the risk all along the value chain, then you encourage more investment through that. I would like for someone to address that or talk about if that's been seen in some of the projects.
Thank you. I take one more right here. And then pause and next.
I am Hugo Lipun of the ICA office in Washington. You have commented quite correctly that long-term investments are necessary in order to sustain these successes. What sort of advice would you provide in order to keep the attention and the interest of donors and politicians who oftentimes are thinking in much shorter terms?
Okay. Let's go back to our panel. David, would you like to pick one?
Sure. Let me address one set of questions, this on post-harvest losses and agriculture value added. When we were devising this study or designing this study, one of the big issues that came up for us was, where are the successes in, say, horticulture? Vegetables, fruit, and helping farmers get them to markets, helping entrepreneurs get into processing, packaging, marketing, and whatnot, adding value and reducing post-harvest losses. And certainly, at least one of our case studies, that on Operation Flood and smallholder dairy in India, is a great example of that. Dairy and milk products are incredibly perishable, and having a good supply chain to reduce losses and to get that commodity to market is incredibly important, especially to smallholder livestock keepers, many of whom are some of the poorest in India. And this success is occurring in many other countries as well. We can look forward to it in the future. But I guess the key issue is this. In horticulture, in vegetables, fruits, lots of other crops, we haven't seen as many successes, not because they're not out there. Raspberries in Guatemala, French cut beans in Kenya, so on and so forth. They're out there, but the documentation of impact at the household level or at the entrepreneurial level or across the entire value chain is just not there. I mean, the body of literature has really not come together yet. And IFPRI is contributing to this body of literature. We have a very important research program on high-value agriculture, and there are many other organizations who are doing work in this and evaluating their own contributions. So I think we can look forward to more documentation on this and more assessment of impact on this. Thank you.
But you will probably also on the dissemination strategy.
Yeah. Let me pick up the second point, the follow-up to the report and the dissemination. There are a number of techniques that we are using, but we are only starting points. I really hope that what will happen is that many others will find it of interest and disseminate it to their own groups. Let me take a step back. Key audiences, we can do direct dissemination to them, which is what we are doing, and indirect through the media. We just this morning had a media briefing that involved about 40 journalists, and we will do different launches in different parts of the world. We have launches in London and Addis Ababa coming up. But those are more direct ways of reaching. What is very powerful is if the civil society groups take this as a starting point and use this as a means of also energizing and getting it into the community. I take Raul's point very seriously. People will pay attention to what other people are saying or thinking, not what I'm writing over here. So how to get this into that avenues, directly and indirectly, having meetings, putting it through the media, getting the video products out, because we want to reach a different generation, which is the generation that pays more attention to visuals rather than necessarily reading or listening. We are live video streaming this. We'll have this up on the web. Blake, if there are ideas that you have that we can do or ideas that others can do, I think more important that we get this dialogue going and get other people to use this and get it out. Last thing, we're also translating into different languages. English is not the only means of communication. The booklet is available already in French, the 30-pager, and it is currently in translation for Spanish and Chinese and possibly German. If the languages that you want to translate into, please, let's get it out. This is not exclusive property here. I think that's the most important message. Use this as a foundation for your own communication to reach your own stakeholders, and let's find ways to multiply.
Mm-hmm. Raul, would you like to?
Yes, briefly. Definitely, this study will be a very good tool for us from farmer organizations when we talk to our government decision makers. It will help support our advocacy. So by itself, maybe it will not be enough, but using it as a tool to advocate and to put pressure on decision makers, it could be very useful. On the profitability along the value chain, that's very important because the farmers are the weakest in that chain, and any additional cost or effort that is needed or cost to that any chain player usually gets translated into low prices for farmers. They carry the brunt of the inefficiency of the value chain. But at the same time, I think the government should also realize that farmers have to have a realistic income, because there is always this debate about farmer, producer versus consumer interests. When food prices go up, people raise a howl, but nobody complains that much when product prices of farmers go down very low. But I think you need a balance for that, because the farmers also have to have their own incomes. And then finally, just on this, some suggestions to governments. In my country, we have elections every 6 years. So the time frame of any policymaker is during that time. And even people deep down in the bureaucracy, they know that after 6 years, they might be replaced. So that is a very short time frame. And I was thinking that it might be good to introduce some revolving fund so that no matter who is in that position, there is a fund that you can tap to implement long-term projects.
Mm-hmm. Prabhu, would you like to add anything at this point?
Yeah, let me make a couple of comments. One is on the last point that Raul brought up, this supposed conflict between longer-term needs versus shorter-term political decision-making. And I think there's an opportunity here, and that is to look seriously at how do you stack investments. There's already so much technology on the shelf out there that's not yet in farmers' fields, that with some short-term, immediate activity, you can get it out while you're continuing to invest in adding to the pipeline itself. And that's the way in which you can play this short-term versus long-term dilemma, I think. Second, I want to come to this issue of developing countries doing the evaluation themselves. This is really very important, because in the end, India doing this for India buys India the political will to go out and invest in agriculture, and similarly with all other countries. And from our point of view, the only way you're going to get there is long-term capacity building in countries, long-term capacity building in agriculture, in economics, in policy analysis, etc. And we've been doing quite a lot of that in the agriculture sciences field, but also in economics, agricultural economics, etc. And we have a big initiative around strengthening think tanks across sub-Saharan Africa. So as we do this, domestic capacity to be able to do such work improves quite significantly, and we hope that will then lead to such activities taking place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'd like to ask the microphones to go to the back of the room. There were a number of hands up. Let's give preference to one of the case study authors. Melinda, you had your hand up?
Just a small comment. I'm Melinda Smale with Oxfam America. I just wanted to make a point on the advocacy work. I had the fortune to be involved in one of the chapters in this book, and I became so enthralled with the story as I worked through it with the co-authors that Oxfam hosted a series of advocacy events a few weeks ago. Rajul and David were behind this. They supported, no, they weren't behind it because they don't engage in advocacy directly, but they supported our efforts to do this. And Oxfam is very interested in the lessons that come from some of these stories regarding aid effectiveness in particular, and how to build grassroots support and development efforts from the bottom up. So there are many important lessons from the stories in these books for a number of constituencies.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Hello, I'm Victoria Quinn from Helen Keller International, and just wanted to say thank you very much for wonderful presentation, and the document is going to be really, really useful. One of the case studies was a Helen Keller International case study on dietary diversification. What we're finding in moving ahead with what has been proven to be a successful way forward is the challenge that the nutritional improvement data do not yet exist in terms of agricultural programs and nutritional outcomes. And we've even had as far as in the Lancet in February with the nutrition series that their comment was insufficient evidence currently exists. So for us in the nutrition world, a huge priority is getting the resources to even better document what's happening now to prove those outcomes, because once we're able to capture that, there should be nothing stopping us. So it's really a plea in terms of we've got a bit more to do before we roll out, because quite honestly, at the resource level with donors and others, they're waiting to see that evidence before investing. And that in a way is a pity, but it really is raising the bar for us. And I'd like to hear if Rajul or David have any comments on that, please.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, right here.
Thank you, David Lambert, and Global Food Security Advisor. Prabhu and others who were at the Borlaug Dialogue a month ago heard, dealing with the same mix of issues, heard speaker after speaker from all over the world talk about the population problem. My question is, could you look through the prism of population and expand on to what extent these success stories have implications on the population issue?
Okay. Let's move the mic into that area. Go ahead.
Jack Hennessy, I'm an independent consultant. I have a couple points. One, were there any successes found in grazing and livestock projects? I've worked in Africa mostly, and in most of the countries I've worked in, that's the largest agricultural sector, and I'm wondering what was found there. Secondly, when you talk about trade-offs and hard choices, what we're seeing now in some countries is the trade-off between biofuel crops and biofuel projects and food projects, particularly from the private sector. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Do we have anyone in that area as well? Well, I think, sorry, please pass it right up front here, and we take you last. Any big urge here? Good.
Hi, I'm Pat Scheid from Aga Khan Foundation. And actually my question is an add-on to the from Helen Keller, because that's also a challenge that we're facing. And how does one then go about bringing together people at the country level who are working on agriculture, you know, the national institutions on, and the ones that are working on nutrition and health? And has there been any success stories around that? And likewise, within Gates Foundation itself, is this a dialogue that you've started to have?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's come back to the panel. Prabhu, would you be so kind to start, maybe including the last point?
The last point is where I can be.
Yeah.
I think the connection between agriculture, nutrition, and health is really very important. My own country, India, has been a big puzzle to me in particular and to everybody else for a long time. And why is it that you can have rapid agriculture productivity growth and supposedly a country moving into an emerging economy status, but still have the largest number of undernourished and malnourished populations anywhere in the world? And what is it that we're doing wrong there? How can you get a better connect between agriculture and nutrition? And is it an agriculture problem per se, or is it a much bigger problem? That's an issue that we're very keenly looking at. We've made a grant to IFPRI, surprisingly.
Well done.
To do a scoping study on how we can engage a broad-based consensus within South Asia, India right now, but we're also looking potentially at Bangladesh to try and tease out all the factors relating to the agriculture-nutrition interface. Ellen McCullough is the program officer on that, and she has a lot more information that she could share.
Raul, I would like to ask first Rajul and David respond to some of the points which came from the audience, and then return to you with a question on what you would see as the best way forward. You have opened up a big issue in your opening remarks, the political economy standing in the way of successes, the intentional political forces preventing successes from moving forward because of interest group issues, and the lack of willingness to address potential win-wins if the relatives or absolutes are against power. I would like to ask you in some sort of closing remarks to address these issues in a moment, on how to move forward beyond what Rajul and David have mentioned. But David, would you come in at this point?
Sure. Let me just take two questions. The first one was on successes in livestock. I'm very pleased that Millions Fed highlights one of the largest, most important successes in livestock, and that's the eradication of rinderpest, a deadly livestock disease. This is the only disease that has been globally eradicated or near to eradication as of, I think, next year, since smallpox in humans. So it's a major success, and in Africa particularly, it's a success because the last pockets of rinderpest have been concentrated in areas such as South Sudan and eastern Ethiopia. So yes, we have several successes on livestock. I guess the other two would be, as I mentioned before, smallholder dairy in India, and the Helen Keller International story of homestead food production, when nutritionists realized that fruits and vegetables weren't the only source of micronutrients to help improve health status among women and children, they turned to small livestock as an important alternative source for important micronutrients. So livestock really has played a big role in these successes. On Victoria's point and Pat's point about nutrition and issues like that, nutrition and agriculture, I guess one of the issues that we ran into as we were developing this book is that there's a lot of literature out there on new agricultural technologies, new crop varieties, new natural resource management practices, and usually the studies done on them are on the adoption rates, right? How many farmers took it up? What type of farmers were they? Why did they take it up? Where were they concentrated? Things like that. One of the questions I think on a forward-going basis is that as we look at new technologies, we have to do the assessment a few steps beyond simply adoption. We have to ask ourselves, well, are there nutritional repercussions? Are people eating more as a result of greater income or greater food produced from this technology? I think we can go a long way in doing more than simply adoption studies, and that sort of gives you a pathway on directions that impact assessment can go towards in the future. There's some outstanding studies in this field already, and more needs to be done.
Mazrul?
Let me pick up on 2 points. The livestock story. One of the challenges that we grappled with was the thinking of agriculture is equal to crops. And I think that this particular work helped us, and I think hopefully will help others to rethink what agriculture is and what agricultural development is. And, you know, when David walked through those pathways of success, I really hope that that will resonate further and that we will be looking further at where can be successes in the making that are not just in the crop area or in the crop breeding area, but in terms of looking ahead, what are some of the major diet diversification issues, major sources of income, livelihoods, and the like, and design interventions also along those roads of looking down the road, not looking along at the past also. This particular set of work, I hope, doesn't mean that tomorrow everybody goes and replicates Operation Flood or Intervention X in their country, but use this as a means of learning what are some of the key factors and then what adapted to that particular environment. Coming to the second point, political role and successes. When you look at several of these successes, you will notice that politicians, policymakers took tremendous risks in some of these countries. China, very powerful case. Vietnam, very powerful case. But there are also politicians or policies at local levels that also, it's not just national level that we should be focusing on or looking at, but there are examples of cases, for instance, in the regreening of the Sahel, very community-oriented. Prabhu made the point. And I think we also have to rethink what is political and where are some of the agents of change that can influence politicians. Or sometimes bypass them. And I think that is also something that we need to think through. You know, where can there be forces of action? Because I think this set of case studies also reveal to us that it is a range of actions over here, range of actors. Some actors are stronger in some places. Some actors are not so strong as they could be because they are impeded in the processes. What we have not done in this set, and which I hope we can do in the future, is look at the role of media in either elevating issues or making a case for action on those areas. But the intertwining of political, media, and other forces, I think, is something we should be also looking at in the future.
Raul, may I call on you?
Well, I think the food crisis that happened last year was very instructive. Because when that happened, then the governments, the national governments themselves, were the ones who sort of began to realize how important agriculture and food production was. In my country, for example, before the food crisis, the unwritten policy was, okay, produce some rice as much as we can, but if it's too expensive, just import. And it was unwritten policy, but it also had effects in terms of budgetary support for the program. But when the food crisis came, then they started reviving their self-sufficiency targets. Whether that's good or bad for us, I don't know, but at least it pushed back or returned the limelight onto agriculture. So one of the things we probably have to do, aside from telling them how to do it, is also tell them what is the cost of not doing it. Maybe some scare tactic coupled with some positive carrot tactic. Sometimes both work better at the same time. Because there is a cost to having this food crisis, not only political but also economic. And then there are nutritional costs that can span generations, even costs in terms of human development. What is the cost of this if you neglect it? The second thing I think is, unfortunately, sometimes governments in developing countries listen more to donors and international lenders than to their constituents. The money gets their ear. No? And there, I think the donors can exercise some pressure on governments. I was talking to some ADB people, and I said, why are you going to agriculture only now in Asia? And they said, because the governments weren't asking money for agriculture. They were asking for other things, not for agricultural investment. But having said that, it's also very important to remember that it's not just a matter of putting more money into agriculture. Many times it's policies that are more important and approaches to the problem. And then finally, the role of civil society, farmer organizations. We just have to continue with that struggle to get the voice, get the ears of the government. There are many sympathetic and supportive people in government from our experience. And we just have to keep on working so that eventually we get things done. Thank you.
You know, thank you very much, panelists. I think it should be easy to engage in a thought experiment on how these success stories have not only changed the lives at the local level, but globally, our lives. Imagine these 20 successes would not have been achieved. What a world we would live in, including what the fast-growing world population, there was a population question was raised, would have to put up with. But it's also extremely rewarding and uplifting to connect to some of these success cases directly. A couple of weeks ago I was in Gujarat and spent the evening in a milk collection point where about 1,800 small farmers, mostly women, deliver their 1 to 3 or 4 liters of milk to the milk collection point, buffalo milk, cow milk, and so on. And imagine that village without that milk collection point. It would be an awful place. Early in my career, actually I think it was my second job, I evaluated Bangladesh shallow tube wells. You find this as one of the success stories. Well, it apparently was. We were so surprised how successful these early shallow tube wells 25 years ago were operating. And they have been a mega success, not just in Bangladesh, but in all of South Asia. Well, a shallow tube well is not just digging a hole and pumping some water. It related to a bold political decision to replace expensive imported, I think it was mainly from Japan, pumping equipment with very cheap South Asian-made equipment. So somebody was foregoing rent there. That foregoing rent is a threat for a policymaker, and opening up markets is an opportunity for some, but a threat for others. And that even applied to that shallow tube well example. So if you look into these cases, you find a story of threat and of political battle in each and every one of them. It's very well known that the India dairy development policies are one of the most contentious issues up until today in India on how to move forward. What I would like to see in the future with the Millions Fed project is that the website stays open, that success nominations can happen, that it is a matter of celebrity to make it on the list as success number 21 and 22 at the end of 2010, and that we continue to monitor and find ways that way to have the uplifting spirit alive in the future and not close this project, have it as a latent success breeding exercise going into the future. Thank you to the team. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for the panel.